Thank you, everybody, and welcome back to our second plenary of this conference on the new vision for food and agriculture in Europe. Welcome again to our online audiences, and apologies that we haven't respected our timing yet, but we are all together now. In our earlier session, we talked very much about generational renewal, and that will be a topic we will address in this panel to explore how to make farming an attractive and viable place for young people to go so that we have a thriving farming community. And one of the key areas that was mentioned this morning is the importance of access to finance and credit. So I'm delighted to introduce our first keynote speaker, the Vice President for the European Investment Bank, Ms. Gelsomina Vigliotti. Please, the floor is yours.
Good morning, and thank you very much for having the European Investment Bank here today to deliver this keynote speech. It's an honor, it's a pleasure to discuss the future of the European agriculture and the wider bioeconomy, and to share with you how we at the European Union Bank, your bank, our bank, are stepping up our support to the sector, to rural communities, and to generational renewal. European farmers, old and young, are vital to European life and a major force in our economies. Those of you working in farming are best placed to understand the challenges: volatile prices, limited bargaining power, scarce long-term credit opportunities. There are new pressures, especially for younger farmers, in finding the funds they need to modernize production, adopt new technologies, and more sustainable farming practices. And even if the funding is available, it often comes with high interest rates and demands for collateral, especially for young farmers who have no established track record and require significant financing, often to start their businesses. We have worked closely with farmers and producers for several decades. We finance directly and indirectly projects across the agricultural, fisheries, food, and forestry value chains. We have been financing the key infrastructure investments, irrigation systems, transport, and new equipment for agri-food industry. More recently, we have also been financing investments in digital platforms that match farmers with their clients. For example, sustainable aquaculture, the circular economy, research, biotech. Last year, we reinforced our strategic focus and alignment with the European Union priorities and policies. We adopted our EIB Group strategic roadmap, and we identified agriculture and the bioeconomy as one of our 8 priorities. We also been cooperating for many years closely with the European Commission, namely DG Agri. Thank you very much. I see the Deputy Director General here. Thank you very much for this great collaboration in the areas of co-financing, mandates, and advisory. This was recognized in the strategic dialogue on the future of EU agriculture, and again now in the Commission's vision for agriculture and food. On resilience, our focus continues to be on helping the agriculture sector prepare better for the effects of climate change. More recently, we have looked in the topic of insurance and the potential to make this more effective in addressing the challenges posed by climate change, particularly extreme weather events. The breakout session this afternoon will include a reference to an advisory study we have recently completed in this regard with the financial support of the European Union Commission. On investment, our advisory service, which has been funded under the so-called Fee Compass mandate that we have with DG Agri, shows that European farming faces a massive financing gap, 62 billion euro in 2022 alone. The survey also showed that increased the share of farmers rely on bank financing and divergences in access to finance conditions across the single market are significant. One specific challenge for farmers is to get finance for the purchase of land. Right now, only 10% of Europe's farmers are under the age of 40, and only 31% are women. The size of the women-led farms, I want to underline, is half of the size of farms managed by men. This issue also needs to be addressed if we have to regenerate and modernize agriculture. Empowering a new generation of farmers is key to ensure the sector's long-run growth, competitiveness, and resilience. How can our bank support these challenges? As one of the deliverables under our strategic action, we approved a €3 billion pan-European agriculture lending envelope to be channeled via partner banks and specialized financial intermediaries in the EU member states to farmers and small and medium businesses. The new lending envelope has three key priorities. First, support young farmers. Second, bolster training in sustainable farming practices and the purchase of land by young or new farmers. And third, improved gender equality in the sector. The financing is meant to spur investments in a range of activities, including soil health, digital tools, water management, and climate resilience. Overall, we expect the funds to mobilize more than €8 billion in financing for agriculture and the overall bioeconomy. And we want to better combine our financing with the European Agriculture Fund for Rural Development and other European Union grant funding by directing and combining to make them more efficient and effective. We already provide financing to the member states to co-finance eligible parts of their CAP programs, but we are also now working with a number of managing authorities looking at ways to combine these funds. And I'm very pleased to announce that a few minutes ago, in the presence of the Commissioner, we signed one of the first loans under the envelope that I announced before with the French banking group, BPCE, which is the third loans that we sign under the envelope after Italy and Portugal. We also need to think of the risking and innovative financing mechanism that could help make credit more affordable, like public guarantees. Through our subsidiary, the European Investment Fund, we are also providing significant volumes of guarantees to banks to improve access to finance of farmers and small companies, using resources from the EU budget, such as InvestEU, but also through the EAFRD and national public resources. In France, for example, we have leveraged a combination of national and EU guarantees, enabling financing to farmers, in particular young farmers, and new entrants of approximately €2 billion. Portfolio guarantees allow banks to take higher risk and require less collateral or provide cheaper funding to farmers and agribusinesses. To conclude, ladies and gentlemen, despite the significant challenges facing young farmers and the generational renewal in the EU, let me nevertheless finish with some optimism, and some others say this morning with pragmatism. We are not working alone. There is a concerted effort on the part of the European Commission, EU member states, and the private sector to improve the ways we support and protect agriculture and the bioeconomy, and the European Investment Bank stay the course to support the sector. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Vigliotti. particularly outlining the different methodologies and tools that are being developed to make sure that we have credit and finance available. And thank you also for highlighting the gender differences in farming. That was one of the points that was raised in the questions from the earlier panel. It's really important to recognize that there is a key role for women in farming, and they have specific needs that need to be addressed. And that is a nice bridge to our next speaker. Before we meet her, let's just watch a little video and find out a little bit more about her background.
Hey. Raven, ja, geweldig. Ja, ze zijn er. Moet even opletten. Ja. Dat is echt ongehoorde rijkdom. En dit is het eerste jaar, dus wat mij betreft kan er nog echt superveel moois gaan gebeuren. Dus het plan is om zowel 40 kilometer aan fruitbomen te gaan planten. Dus dat worden 200 verschillende rassen aan fruitbomen en nog veel meer variëteiten. Daar komt straks 40 ton fruit van af.
There we just saw a little taster of the daily life of Anne van Leeuwen, who is a Dutch young farmer and a farmfluencer, and she has some messages she would like to share with us. Anne.
Thank you. Well, I grew up with some goats and some chickens and a lot of love for life. I didn't grow up as a professional farmer, but definitely in a Dutch polder context. And I remember when I was 5 years old that one of the things I expressed at primary school was that I wanted to be a farmer, because I already felt then that it was something that really made me happy. The reaction that I got from the children in my school was not positive whatsoever. Actually, farming was used as a swearing word. So I learned that it was not a good thing to be a farmer. And I think it's even extra difficult if you are a female. I also learned during my school that there is a separation between nature on one side and agriculture at the other side. I learned it's either biodiversity or productivity. That made farming for me not attractive. So I simply thought farming was not for me. I ended up studying way too long. But then something happened to me when I was 28. I saw an amazing documentary about the regeneration of the Lhasa Plateau in China. And that was the first time that I saw that something like regeneration is actually possible. This was not about either or, but this was about and. For the first time I saw that we could actually come into action to restore degraded ecosystem while the socio-economic situation of the people in place improved. So it was ecological win, it was economic win, and it was social win. I was sold when I saw that. In that time, I also met my partner, a Spanish biologist, Ricardo Cana Mateo. We traveled to Europe in search for references of regeneration and regenerative farming, and we learned at places in the south of Spain and in mid-Sweden. We really needed to look for those references that could help us to envision what a business model could look like that could actually work for regenerative farming. That was about 8 years ago. 6 years ago, I started my first farm, a small-scale farm of 5 hectares, called Bodemzicht, or Soil Perspective, where we were actually direct marketing fresh vegetables, nutritious, healthy food to our local community. We sold everything within 8 kilometers, as well as the layers from the eggs from our layers that we moved around in chicken mobiles to regenerate the soil and to come to a healthy soil, because we found out that agriculture is a fantastic means not only to deal with climate change, but actually to mitigate climate change. And it was such a success, and so many young people came to our farm that we needed to give tours. Then we were giving tours, and then so many people came with our farm with deeper questions that we started to give courses. And then we were giving courses, and so many, especially young people, came to the farm, and they wanted to organize activities that we started all kinds of collaborations. So our farm grew a little bit out of control in a beautiful way. This makes that we moved actually to a much bigger farm, where we are farming now, the one that you saw in the video. It's a 45-hectare farm where we are working on this beautiful mixed landscapes with an agroforestry system, a no-dig market garden, a tree nursery, our chickens, and we will also have cows in the future. We will have herb layers. It will be extremely diverse. And why? Because diversity is the key to resiliency. Not only economic diversity, because that's what we also need in farms. So we diversified our economic system to make it work. And this is also because in the current economic system, it's extremely challenging to start as a farmer, especially if you're a new entry farmer and you don't inherit a farm. Just to give you an example, my current farm costs 4.3 million euros in the Netherlands. And if you then see the price of a carrot, well, you can quickly make the calculation that farm economics doesn't work. So this is one of the challenges we're facing, land access and access to farms. So we need help on that. We need long-term patient capital. We need a healthy interest, not one that pushes for extractive practices and puts the farmer under too much pressure. And if it's possible, we need a grace period, so we come to realistic planning, but also the farmer can feel the space to actually invest in the land and regenerate the place, as well as the communities. So what we do, we have 9 business lines, and so we diversify our economic structure, but also we work in a cooperative model, because otherwise we could have never have this entry to a farm. So we have an innovative land-to-land model, which pre-finances the farm. We ask people to become co-owners of the place. They help us to carry the load of the huge investment that is there. But this is all a mechanism, because with the current financial mechanisms, we couldn't make it work. So that's something I would like to give to you as an example. But we also diversify and build for resilience in our landscapes, in our productions. We invest in our water cycles. We invest in restoring our soil so we have healthy soil. And we invest in diversifying our production with more than 200 species and varieties. So we make a landscape, we farm without any pesticides, without any artificial fertilizer. And we farm in a way that we have so much diversity that everybody eats each other, so that there's enough to eat for everyone. That's our resiliency, and it works. So, thank you. I just wanted to quickly say something about social resiliency, because we feed our local communities, and I think we should feed our local communities way more in Europe, because we can do that, and we also build then this relationship between farmer and eater, and I think it's super important, because there's a lot of ignorance as where the food comes from and what it takes to farm. And we work on a national level with a lot of pioneers that come to our farm, and we support each other, because rules and regulations don't befit me. Joel Salatin once said very wisely, everything I want to do is illegal, and sometimes it feels for me like that because I don't fit the boxes. Usually there's no box for me. And on a European level, we're working together with EARA, which is an amazing conglomeration of 70 farmers from all over Europe, highly diverse, from market gardeners to huge arable farmers to people with Iberian pigs underneath the beautiful dehesas in Portugal and Spain. And here we all have different practices. So here we celebrate that diversity as well, but we all share the same principles and have that dot on the horizon and where we want to go. And to make it easy for you all, we made actually an evolution of the CAP. We wrote it down, so we really invite you to come and speak with us and speak about the future of CAP, the CAP, and we also have this beautiful joint response on the agri-food vision, in which we put everything down that we think is the future of farming. So, I imagine the future of farming. So if you want to see that, eara.farm, have a look. at our proposal, but I imagine the future of farming to be thriving places, not only in terms of life and food production, because the business side also needs to be good, but also in terms of social development. Farms are thriving social places where people meet each other. And you know, I am now standing before you 6 weeks pregnant. And I may hope that if my child is 5 years old, farming is something to aspire to in Europe. Thank you.
Thank you. So, very much the future of farming and a very clear vision. And we'll make sure the link that you mentioned to your proposal about the future of CAP, we can share that link with all the participants so they can read the document developed by 70 farmers across Europe. So thank you for that. Let me invite some people to come and join me here on the panel, and we'll discuss this in a little bit more detail. So Martin Seaman, the Vice Chair of Rural Youth Europe, Peter Middendorp, the CEJA President, Jean-Christophe Rubin, Director for Agriculture of Crédit Agricole SA, Norbert Tocznik, the Austrian Federal Minister for Agriculture and Forestry, Erika Olsen, and the organic farmer and president of the Swedish Organic Farmers Association, also representing IFOM, and Francesco Lollobrigida, the Italian Minister for Agriculture and Food. So please, all come and welcome. So, Martin, let me start with you, because the Commissioner spoke this morning about the fact that there'd been a dialogue yesterday with young farmers, and that was referred to also in the Commission President's message. So this is very much a new conversation. Can you just, in 2 minutes, give us a few takeaways from that conversation?
Yes. Yes, sure. It was a great pleasure to be part of the Youth Policy Dialogue, the second one actually, hosted by DG Agri and the Commissioner. We've been around 25 participants, very diverse backgrounds, young farmers and rural backgrounds. And the focus was, as already said, on generational renewal strategy, and then more especially on the access to land and access to finance. And while we've been a very diverse group, we were able to find also some common ground on problems, but also solutions. And when we speak about access to land, we all acknowledge that there is a lack of availability of land at a fair price. That comes also because of conflicting regulations. There is a big competition with other businesses as well, like the energy production or tourism. And sometimes, and in many regions in Europe, we have also challenging natural conditions. So together we called for implementing some kind of a regulatory body for that. And another very interconnected problem is the land concentration. We see with the hectare-based subsidies that this is an incentive also for land concentration, and therefore we would call for looking for other criteria for awarding subsidies like sustainable and active use of land. And then when it comes to access to finance, we've discussed a lot more support, more targeted support, especially for new entrants to the sector, those that miss capital and struggle with bank collaterals, that they have to have better support, but also support for all kinds of farming. And I think we heard a good testimony here. Farming is very diverse, and yet not all funding sources are available for all kinds of farming. And to take it one step further, the group has agreed also on not just accessing finance, but if you're a young farmer and you want to start your own business, then it needs to be a business that's profitable and has a future. So everyone called for the guarantee of fair prices of the products, and that this is in a way also considered in policy making. Yeah, in general, it was a very fruitful exchange, but we also realized that many of the points that we've discussed are on member states level, and therefore we really hope that the member states are also supporting young farmers all over Europe and the generational renewal.
Thank you very much, Martin. So let me just explain how we're going to run this panel. I have a question for each member of the panel, and then I'll be opening the floor to Slido to you. And so you know how to do this. You need to you look on your badge. At the back, you'll see the Slido code. You can submit your questions. And at that point, when it's the Q&A, I'll invite Ms. Vigliotti to come back and join us to answer the questions from the audience. So let's start with our panel. Peter. Access to finance is often listed as one of the biggest challenges for young people entering farming. And we heard from Anne, who, just the price of a serious amount of land in order to create a farm. So what steps do you think could be taken to reduce the financial barriers that young farmers have?
Yes, thank you very much. Maybe first I start with a small personal anecdote, because recently on my farm we have gone through the process of refinancing. Where for us the refinancing is already a barrier to access the land we are farming. Seeing the new banking rules, banks are very much focusing on liquidity. Cash is king for a bank. And long-term liquidity planning is increasingly more difficult in an uncertain farming reality. That's also why we were happy with the vision of Hansen, which is trying to address this uncertainty in agriculture, but we really see three main points on which we have to continue working in this mandate to make the vision reality. And that firstly, of course, starts with the structure of the next European budget, with the MFF, that we need to keep a European, harmonized and dedicated structure in order to create a structural pillar under our farms, the farms of young farmers, the farms of our members. Secondly, we have challenging environmental and climate legislation. We really see Solo working on these particular topics when it comes to climate, when it comes to water, when it comes to nature. All these things come together at our farm, and we really need a framework around all the sum of all these different challenges. Because we see there are trade-offs between the different ambitions, there are inconsistencies between the different ambitions, and we need to talk about those. And thirdly, it's about our trade policy. We need to be more assertive in our trade. We need to work on the technical implementations of the barriers at our border. This is also the signal which member states are giving us. And in the end, it cannot be the case that every time when we sign a trade agreement, we have to talk about crisis mechanisms or separate funds for agriculture to deal with the negative effects of these trade agreements. So to conclude, for us, the access to finance is really a symptom of what we see as uncertainty in the agricultural sector. And within CESIA, we are calling this the young farmer equation, where we have conflicting demands from the value chain actors, from the government, but also from banks, where for a lot of young farmers, it simply doesn't add up anymore, and they decide to quit. We hope that within this mandate we can create more clarity for this young farmer equation to make a better outcome for a lot of individual young farmers which are now making the decision whether to step into the sector or not. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Short, sharp, and very perfect. Jean-Christophe, let me turn to you, because we had an initial intervention from the EIB setting out, how the sort of public funding and investment mechanisms work, but how does that align from the role of private banks in providing capital to young farmers like Martin or to Anne? Please go ahead.
So thank you very much for the opportunity of participating to this meeting. Thank you to the Commissioner and all of the colleagues from DG Agri. I will switch in French, if you permit. Je voudrais d'abord partir d'un constat.
Well, let's begin by making one observation and sharing some key figures. In France, we have 15,000 young farmers joining the profession, and what we see today is that 60% of them are people who are coming from the agricultural profession, so their parents are farmers, but 40% do not. This means that they don't have a farming background. So the question of access to finance is even more important for those who aren't going to inherit the land or a farm. The question, therefore, is what kind of mechanisms can we set up to support these new entrants into the agricultural profession? The Vice President is here, and I'd like to thank her. We have the European Investment Fund colleagues and all of the programs that we've implemented in France. We have enough in 2019, 1.1 billion of a lending envelope that was guaranteed through a process under the EFI. Next week, with the French Minister for Agriculture, we're going to sign a more ambitious program. We also have regional programs in France. And why are these guarantees so important for a banker? Well, they're fundamental. They cover 80% of the investment. They are free for the farmer. And therefore, the bank, we're following all of the rules that exist, including rules under from the ECB about not lending to a certain type of client that might be considered fragile or with not enough of their own contribution. Well, that we can still make those investments, and a lot of investments are possible thanks to these guarantees. So thank you to the Vice President and thank you to all colleagues who bring these to life in the regions and national level. Another crucial point is that we can talk about new tools in financial engineering. We need to come up with new models to support people rather than just loans. In Crédit Agricole, we have mobilized €1 billion and we've created 3 tools. One tool is a private equity tool. It's investment capital for farmers and the food industry. And this is targeted for anything for the transition and all new entrants in this profession. We've also set up a debt fund. This is more for big business and corporates, but it's on the same topic. And we've also made a venture capital fund, which is to support innovation. And as the Commissioner mentioned, this also covers AI and all new uses of that. So it's €1 billion with a single guiding principle, and that covers the transitions and generational renewal. I'm getting quite grey-haired, myself, because we've talked about generational renewal for a long time, but today it's really a reality. In some French departments, we have 3 farmers retiring with 1 new one, but we know that in due course, 50% of farmers will retire. So this fight for generational renewal, this vision for the agriculture of tomorrow is crucial. We need to come up with new financial tools that allow us to support these new entrants. And they have capital needs, as my neighbour just mentioned, which are getting ever more significant. So there is work to be done between the private and the public sector in order to come up with such tools. And the work needs to cover all stakeholders, including the EIB and the others. We all need to be aware of this challenge. We need to produce, but in order to produce, we need men and women who can afford to become farmers. Thank you.
So in our first panel, the Minister from Poland mentioned a number of different things that young people need in order to get access to farming. He talked about access to land, and we've touched on that, access to finance, but also to knowledge, to support, to rural services and other areas. So now let's explore a little bit more about what are the other elements that are essential to create an attractive sector for the future and foster generational renewal. So let me now turn to the example from Austria, because this is a successful example when it comes to generational renewal. So Minister Tocznik, what are the policies in Austria that have contributed to this success? What is your secret sauce?
Ja, vielen Dank, sehr geehrter Kommissar.
Thank you. Commissioner, Ministers, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for the invitation, this initiative and these discussions. Austria is a small country and has very small farms, many of them 24 hectares on average, And this does affect our agricultural policy. Very many small farms. Why do we have so many people under the 40 years of age in farming? This is well below the European average, 12%, and we think that there are three main reasons here. Firstly, we invest a great deal in further education and training. In the federal Austria, we have an awful lot of schools and specific schools, and we have invested an awful lot of money in all of these technical schools, and they are full, even though the number of people in the rural areas on the land working is reducing. We have very full schools, and they go through a full education, they get diplomas, and they work together with functional research institutions. So on the one hand, we have research for farming, and on the other hand, we have education, and this leads to an awful lot of demand. Lots of students in Wiesenburg, for example, they are specialized in digitization. 50% of those who graduate from there will go into small companies. And so then we have the pedagogical training for the teachers and the trainings. We have 5,550 places, teaching places filled with people from the land, from farming. So that's a very high percentage. So education, and then a sustainable environment-oriented farming. For many years, a lot of my predecessors were also ministers, and the environment policy has been linked to agriculture and agricultural production. So we have very high esteem for farming and farmers in the Austrian community. So they are valued, and that is because of our overall agricultural policies too. So we have agricultural development and this first pillar funding. So we have policies here. We have support for farmers, for organic farming, a lot of investment in those taking over farms, converting farms and investing. Then we also have a surface extensive farming where we are looking at quality. It is an emphasis. So we have technical connections there, and we accompany the farmers all the way to the market. And then we have social and tax framework issues. We have funding for the agricultural area, and there's many millions of euros spent here, and that makes it possible to have social security in farming. So we have the Commissioner from Luxembourg. It's a very good system. The pensions, the social security levels have been raised for farmers to an equal level with other sectors too. So farmers don't have to stay farmers. They can retire, and they are covered too. They have social security like everybody else. And in terms of tax, which is important too, we have a single tax, and there are various tax levels. So farmers don't pay income tax. So this makes it farmers to pass on their farm. So taking over a farm is not a burden for the next generations. And what other elements are there? It's also very clear that for the discussions, first pillar, second pillar, agricultural development, 4.4% of German budget. These are areas where we are working constantly, and this work will continue because it is part of what has to be done to secure our future. Thank you.
thank you. That was really interesting to see how you looked at the whole life cycle to make, strong investment in training and support and education. So you've got the skills, then there is a cultural approach, so the role of farmers in society is valued and there's a status for that. And then you're looking towards the end of life, looking at pensions and social security. So farmers have a guarantee they can retire and they'll still be able to pass their farms on. So we've seen that life cycle of support. So really interesting examples from Austria. Thank you. Martin, let me come back to you because we've just heard a little bit from Austria. So beyond financial support, and we've heard some of the other measures they have there, what would make farming more attractive for the young generation and meet their aspirations of what they want to achieve? And I think Anne, when she gave her presentation, said they've got 70 farms together and they've got a dot in the future. They've got a real vision about what farming means to them and where they want to go. So how do we encourage more of that, make that attractive to other young people?
Yes, thank you very much. Yeah, first of all, I'd like to introduce you to the work of Rural Youth Europe. We're really focusing on retaining young people in rural areas or giving them the opportunity to return. We try to create opportunities for them and advocate for keeping rural areas vibrant and sustainable places to live. And I want to draw a bigger picture because we also heard before that it's the holistic view of a rural area that we need to look at, because farmers and farms don't exist in a vacuum. They are part of a whole ecosystem, and therefore we need strong rural areas. If there are no young people in rural areas, additional to all the specific measures we just heard, then there is also no possibility for generational renewal. And for thriving rural areas, we need diverse job opportunities there, also outside of the farming sector, because we need a bigger community that's not just farming focused. We need infrastructure, basic services, and also cultural opportunities so that the youth in rural areas can feel a sense of belonging and also is advocating for their areas and likes to live there. And then maybe at some point we also get the possibility that people from urban areas start moving there and considering to become a farmer. I'd like to point out some specifics here. We often see all over Europe that housing is a big problem. Young people that at some point they want to move out from their parents' place, because also not everyone can take over the farm, or there is just not enough room for another family in this property. And in villages, often there is less possibilities to rent, also to rent for for a fair price, because prices are rising in rural areas, also because of tourism, but also some some older people from urban areas recently discovered that it's nice to live there, and then prices go higher as well. Those that are still affordable, we struggle with the cost of renovation, and this is a whole chunk of things. Then, we heard about this before as well. If you want to found a family and you are working on a farm, that's more than just for a 9-to-5 job. And then if you if you get a child, you need some opportunities to raise that child properly. And childcare is also often missing in rural areas. Either there need to be innovative solutions to childcare, or we have some kind of replacement systems with farm helpers. Lastly, we want to have food production more integrated into schools' curricula, so that at a very early age, the pupils already learn about where their food comes from and and how it's produced. So it's not only good for the image of agriculture, but as well for the attractiveness of the sector. So at some point they might consider becoming farmer as well. And that the consumers later on also do more informed food choices. To sum up, it's very many areas that play into rural life, and therefore, as a conclusion, it would be necessary to implement some practices of rural proofing into all EU policies.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Martin. Erica, I'm going to come to you, and this will be the last intervention before I open the floor. So please submit your questions via Slido, and I've seen quite a few already come in. So thank you for that. Erica, you're here representing organic farmers across Europe, and the data shows that organic farmers are on average younger than their conventional counterparts. So from your view, what makes organic farming so attractive to young people?
Well, first of all, I run a farm 80 kilometers south of Stockholm in Sweden together with my husband and my 22-year-old son. So discussions about generational renewal is what I have for breakfast almost every day. And I think that when we address generational renewal, we can do that on the same time as if we discuss the fostering of organic farming, because it goes hand in hand. When we look in the statistic, we can see, we heard it before, but we can see that only 13% of all organic farmers are older than 65 years old. And if you compare that to all farmers, you can see that 33% of all farmers in Europe are older than 65. And if you look at the young farmers, you see that 10% of all farmers in Europe are younger than 40. But if you compare that to only organic farmers, you see that the number is double. 21% of all organic farmers are younger than 40 years. And I think that's an obvious difference. So why is that, your answer? Why is that so? Why are organic farmers younger? I think there are many answers, but I'll try to give you three. I think, first of all, one answer is the size of organic farms. Because our systems, when you are an organic farmer, you can't grow really big. If you have a biodiversity on your farm, you may have cattle, you may have vegetables, rural areas. You can't grow as big as there's a limit in how big your farm can become. And your farm has to be big enough to be healthy. So I think the size of the farm is one answer. It's easier to pass on a middle-sized farm to the next generation. A really big farm is tough to solve all the financial for. And the next answer, I think, is the way we work with nature, the way organic farming work with nature and not against nature, and the way we don't have to be exposed to synthetic chemicals is really something that attracts young people. And for me as a mother, I'm really happy about being organic, especially when I see my 22-year-old son out in the field driving his big tractor. I'm really, really glad that he does it in an organic way. And if you ask the young people, I think their answer is, why are they organic? It's because organic systems combine old tradition and knowledge with new technique. Young organic farmer often says that organic farming is knowledge intensive rather than input intensive. It's not easier to be an organic farmer. You have to think more, plan more. You can't fix mistakes you make afterwards. You have to do right from the beginning. So you really have to plan, and you have to be innovative, and you can use new technique. So I think that's really the third answer, the combine of old traditions and new technique. So what can we learn, and what do we need for the future? What do we need? I think we really need farmers. They need access to land, of course, and access to finance, and access to policy, long-term policy, so we are secure when we move into our new system. I'm sorry, I'm out of time. Yeah.
That's great. Thank you very much, Erica. So you've set out some of the sort of structural reasons why organic farming may be attractive to younger people, the smaller size of farm, the fact that it's innovative and it's very knowledge-based, it gives them a chance to test things out. But also you've highlighted, some of the challenges that exist about finance and being able to move forward. Let's now turn to the example of Italy, because we heard from Austria the policies that were put in place for young people, and you also have something really interesting happening in Italy, something called Generazione Terra, if I've pronounced it correctly, and that's to help young people to access land when they're starting out, and it's been recognized as having real potential for the future. So can you tell us how it's being implemented?
Grazie, un saluto al commissario.
Thank you. Good morning to Mr. Hansen and to all colleagues present, and hello to all of the young farmers. You're very brave to take on this challenge that has been described in various ways in recent times. And in Italy, we've set up some interesting economic initiatives to support entrepreneurs or farmers when they start out. We had a problem, though, which really threatened this kind of incentive, because we had a 2010 reform of state aid which banned directly financing the purchase of land. And so now I'm making a request to the Commissioner, to Mr. Hansen, and I hope I can share it with colleagues, is that we should review this provision in order to allow for the financing of land purchasing in order to make it available to young people. Now, having said this, in the last 2 years, Italy has invested in agriculture to a level of 11 billion euros, and that's the most amount ever invested by an Italian government in this sector. It's a primary sector that we consider to be really central. We have experienced a difficult time during which agriculture was considered as marginal, replaceable, something that should be supported towards its dusk. But we think that we are overcoming this. One British think tank thought there would be a time where we would have to light fires to show that 2 + 2 is 4 and that leaves in summer are green. Now, this has happened across Europe too. Certain certainties are crumbling. We used to be certain about everything, but pandemics, wars have shown us that food security is coming back as a central aspect. Food sovereignty is guaranteed to us by our farmers and fishermen. In the words of Ms. von der Leyen, I see one very new aspect, and with respect to the previous 5-year term, where we had to criticize policies that in the last 3 decades led to the loss of 35% of European farms. This is damage to our economy, to our culture, our identity, and our environment. And it's another fact I think that we need to stress. Now, the custodians of the environment are, above all, farmers, not people wandering around, marching in town centres with placards saying that they are the enemies of the environment. We had the experience of the farmer who said as a child she wanted to be a farmer, but was considered as being a baddie by her schoolmates. I think Europe needs to make some investments in terms of guaranteeing an income for farmers. Without an income, passion is not enough. It's not enough to set up your own business. And in Europe, we're not deaf. We have competition in the East and in the West, and we need some protection for our system. We hope ever less with the tariff systems, but rather rules of reciprocity. Things that we require of farmers, which are quite right and legitimate in terms of protection of workers, protecting rights, protecting the environment. This all comes at a cost. And that cost must be reflected in a fair price for the products that they create. They create them by working harder than their colleagues in other parts of the world. So here, Europe must guarantee protection and better controls and better information for people, for consumers who purchase products. Labels, not ones that force you to head to one part of a supermarket rather than another, but rather informative labels, things that tell you what's in a product. Europe's calling card is quality, and quality allows for a fair price, which is passed on down the chain and means that the primary producers get a fair price. Now, I'll conclude by saying the following. I think this awareness of the role of farmers has existed in times past, and they are simple men and women that we need to take that idea back. Cicero said that among income-producing professions, none are better than farming. There's no more profitable, no more pleasant, and none more right for people. And I think we need to allow young people to get involved, as our colleague Norbert was saying in Austria. They have been successful, and this is the best way to push people towards taking up this crucial work. And so many thanks to anybody who is taking up this challenge.
Thank you. We're now going to pass to the Q&A. If I could invite Ms. Vigliotti to join us to answer questions from the audience. We've got a very lively Slido here, so I'm going to try and combine some of these to bring elements up to the panel. So welcome. There's a microphone on your chair, Ms. Vigliotti. So a couple of questions are coming in about the role of speculation and investors buying land, which then drives up the prices for farmers. So I wonder if there's anyone on the panel who would help us to explore what could be done from a structural way to support farmers, particularly young farmers who want to buy land, but not make it so attractive that we've got investment companies and other people, speculators coming in because agricultural land is now more accessible. Who wants to respond on that? Yes, please.
Yes, thank you very much for this question also, because it is really a structural problem at the land market that we, as young farmers and farmers in general, find actors from outside of farming, either for investing or for securing their supply to buy farmland. I think the European Parliament has already made a great step with the initiative of a land observatory for farmland, where we start with monitoring who buys what land at the European level, because at the moment there is no data on who is buying what land, and so before we want to structure the land market, this is a very important step. We as CESIA have been quite involved in this as well, so we really hope that this land observatory will fly now to prevent situations like you mentioned.
Excellent, thank you. Anyone else, please?
Yes, maybe. Just a few words about that. You know, until last year, we didn't allow as a bank, to finance the acquisition of land. But actually, for all the reasons which have been explained so far, the lack of access of finance, also to make available for young farmers who haven't any collaterals to access finance, within our programs now land purchase it's allowed, and obviously, this is not for land, it's extreme vast land acquisition. So I think that is very important for the generational renewal.
Yes, we are very thankful for that. We are very thankful for the EIB for that, because we know how hard it was for giving these loans also for the acquisition of land for young farmers.
Excellent. Thank you. So, Jean-Christophe, I've actually got a specific question for you to say, could a farmer like Anne, so a small farmer developing a sort of new practice, would they be able to get a loan from your bank? And if so, what kind of conditionality would you be putting on small farmers, perhaps farmers who are entering, doesn't have a long farming background? How do you manage the risk of providing finance to someone whose business plan is not clear, wants to do something that didn't exist before, perhaps the market knowledge and information is not there? How much risk are private banks going to take?
Ce n'est pas une question facile.
Well, that's not an easy question, because banks are risk adverse. They don't like them. These new practices, transition, there is an obligation for a banks to have a green asset ratio. Sorry, it gets technical. So we do have to lend to firms that are in transition too. We've developed all sorts of tools to cover organic farming, short circuit, and new practices, new chains and sectors that are going to develop. First and foremost, we need to understand the economic project, understand the new sector, this new position, exotic fruit, or there's all sorts of new things today. Water culture, aquaculture, things that are linked to greenhouses, not open field cultivation. And when we understand them, we can create a financial product to accompany the project. So we have to look at whether the project is going to yield an income. And that is linked to competitiveness. Will it generate an income, a profit? We don't look big holding, small holding, traditional holding, innovative farm. What we try to do is accompany them. Is it a viable economic project? It might take us longer to work this out for a new project, so we have to determine the duration, the time frame of the loan as compared to the project. So yes, we do support innovative farms because it's economic competitiveness that counts, not the model.
Because both of you have spoken about the cultural and traditions from Italy and from Austria in farming that are important to maintain. But some of the questions we're getting in are about new ways of farming, so plant proteins, precision fermentation. How much are you putting a balance in the policies you're putting forward to encourage people into farming because of its tradition and its importance in the way that you do things? And how much are you putting support to say there are new ways you can do things? Here is some research and support. What's the balance between your policy objectives around maintaining the cultural, the history, the tradition, and then making sure that farming is also cutting edge, innovative and very different? How do you get that balance right from a policy point of view?
Come vuoi. Io credo che due elementi non siano assolutamente in contrasto.
Well, I don't think those two aspects are in conflict. You have the technological innovation throughout the history of agriculture that's always allowed for modernization. And for that, we have investments in research and to support education. We think that new genomic techniques, NGTs, are an element that may end up supporting our farmers by boosting production and reducing costs without modifying the natural development processes as you might have with GMOs. It leads to a more resilient agriculture that can resist certain pathologies, and it also leads to a reduction in the use of plant protection products, and farmers welcome that. The plant protection products are medicines, and if you need a medicine, if you use it. But if you do, if you choose not to, then you may reduce your production, and then you may reduce your incomes as well. Not everybody takes up the challenge of organics. We also have innovation, agriculture 5.0. That's something that we fully support. And then we also are trying to push against certain trends, such as lab-made meat. Italy is the first country in the world, and now followed by other countries, to have banned the production and import of cultivated meat. And with it means producing lab-grown meat means reducing livestock and damages agriculture. So yes to innovation and research, but obviously in line with defending our identity and our traditions. We think that can be summed up in one word, that is quality. Quality of the product, which means well-being for citizens, but also for everybody who chooses to adopt this lifestyle and approach of farming.
Also, mentioned welfare. We've had a couple of questions coming in about animal welfare, so that's an element that needs to be reflected in our conversations. From Austria.
Also ich glaube, man muss beginnen damit.
I think that you have to look at the sector as a whole and the challenges. The climate change, for example, has a huge effect on crops where suddenly they need irrigation systems, they have to water, and animal welfare standards are important too. In Austria, we are once again tightening up our animal welfare regulation, so higher standards are going to have to be met, and the major challenge there is that these farming systems have to produce marketable meat products. So we have all these technological developments too. We have to ensure that these trickle down to farming too. So we need advanced research. It has to be combined with training. We have innovation farms in Austria. They want to showcase new practices, modern technologies to see how they work and demonstrate these advantages. We want to ensure that these are accessible, and this is a policy point too. We want to have set up a network to ensure that there is access to these technologies. Of course, it all boils down to money. You need money for research, money for market measures, money for training and education, money to help products reach the market. So it often boils down to the fact that we need a stable common agricultural policy so that we can focus on things that are new and these innovations that work, and not just try to work with things that maybe be a dead end. What we also need is less bureaucracy. We are drowning in new legislation, particularly from the Green Deal, and we're trying to explain things to farmers now, and everybody does think we really need to ensure that there is freedom for the entrepreneurial spirit to ensure that these new technologies can be adopted and to give people room and space to grow.
Martin, maybe I could bring you in at this point, because the words have been spoken, the Green New Deal, and they were also came up in a couple of Slido questions earlier. So we heard from the Minister from Austria that it sometimes feels that the Green New Deal and the approach on the environment creates boxes within which it's really hard for farmers to be able to get on with what they want to do and to develop their farming and agricultural practices. What does that feel like on the ground for farmers? You know, we have these clear environmental objectives, and we know that we've got to make major efforts to improve the quality of our soil in Europe. So our farming practices have led to some environmental problems, and now we want to clean them up, but we also need farmers to keep doing what they're doing and to be supported. So what do these things feel like on the ground in farms?
Yeah, on the ground, I think it's two sides. First of all, it creates a lot of pressure from outside, from those that are not, not very close to farming and have a lot of expectations. And then on the other side, farming is the most affected sector of the climate change, and at the same time also a sector that can make a big difference here. And these things shouldn't block each other. So on the ground, we see good practices and people being very innovative, trying new things, but they also need the possibilities to do that. They need the possibilities to practice some stuff that hasn't been there before, try out new crops in the soil that's not used to that. And there it comes again that we need support for that. Especially young farmers show a lot of motivation to innovation and entrepreneurship, and we really would like to use that potential.
Peter, can I bring you also in on that? Because, you know, the Green New Deal is very much designed to sort of encourage the transition to what we need for climate and for cleaner energy and to produce food in a way that's, you know, environmentally friendly, but also fair prices for farmers. So where does this feeling of contradiction between this sort of Green New Deal ideas and what's needed for farmers, can you give us a concrete example of that?
Yes, if you're talking about the Green Deal ambitions of the last the last 5 years, for us the most important is that we stop treating ambitions we have and goals we have as dogmatic. There's nothing wrong with ambitions. With high ambitions, there's nothing wrong as long as we don't as long as we keep in mind that the most important is that we talk about how do we accelerate making steps on the farm. No one is helped with making legal obligations for 2050 in all different kind of fields in separate ways. In the end, a farm has to know what is my assignment, what do I need to do, where is the room for if I see a contradiction on my farm, where is the room to discuss possible trade-offs between animal welfare, CO2, biodiversity? Is there room for that discussion in my assignment I have? And then how do we accelerate that individual farms make steps? That is where the discussion should be about. I find it useless to discuss goals of 2050 and make the entire discussion based around that. I think also that was the biggest conclusion of the Strategic Dialogue report on which CISA also has participated, because let's not waste another 5 years on targets for 2050, 2030, because we need to make steps, and that should be the discussion about. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So now let's explore a few more issues that have come in on our Slido, and we've had quite a few questions that are asking about, you know, where is the future of farming and where should we be going to? We know that we have political goals of food sovereignty. We know that we want to keep producing quality food in Europe and being an exporter, but several of you have mentioned in this panel and the previous panel about global trade rules, that we exist where we have trading practices with other people. Some of the previous ministers talked about the importance of reciprocity, and I think you've also mentioned it. So maybe we can pick up on this issue a little bit. You know, what is the role of farming in an environment where we have global trade partners and we have a priority to make sure that we've got food sovereignty, but we also have trading relationships? Is there anyone who might like to talk on this issue of fair pricing? It was mentioned by the Commission President in her video that this should be a fundamental element, that farmers should get fair prices and should be able to make a profit. They should be able to make a decent living for the future. Can anyone sort of make a comment there on how fair prices for farmers fits in the fact that we are an open market in Europe? That's politically what we are, and we have global trading relationships. Who would like to comment on that? Yes, please. Thank you to our politicians who are taking up the tough questions.
Io credo che non sia complicatissimo.
I don't think it's very complicated to understand that we had one time where you thought you could purchase outside Europe for much less money and support sectors that were no longer essential and could be let to decline. And I think back then agriculture was considered to be one of those sectors. And Europe imposed some rules. Some were correct, some were excessive. These rules in Europe reflect or are reflected in a higher cost of production, and that must be recognized in the final price for consumers, partly because the consumer must be aware that out of respect for this work, they pay more money. In other areas, of course, we have to avoid competition existing in distribution that allows for products to be distributed that are much cheaper because they are produced without respecting workers' rights and the environment. When you have international agreements, let's take Mercosur by way of example. As a whole, Mercosur is probably a good deal for Europe. However, it's probably not describing a positive future for agriculture in the way it's currently drafted. So this needs to be understood by European countries that also have a different approach to this issue. We want to understand how much Europe thinks it's important today to invest in order to protect this primary sector. There needs to be major investments and forms of protection and control with regards to imports. The rules that prevail at home must also be respected in those places where we purchase certain products. Otherwise, however hard our farmers try, they will never be as resilient as they need to be in order to meet this challenge. Now, we can, of course, consider incentives. New farms in Europe are often places that might attract tourists. They can diversify their activities. But this other side of protection and control does also have to exist alongside that. We cannot survive on imports because when you do, you become a hostage to a geopolitical situation which unfortunately is extremely unstable.
We're coming towards the end of our time together, so if I could invite you, those who want to still speak on this, just keep it very short.
Ich möchte kurz ergänzen.
I'd just like to briefly add to what Minister Lollobrigida has already said. Europe does have had surpluses, and we exported these, so trade is very important for agriculture, exports too. But we also have to ensure that we have security of supply within the EU for the member states. So strategic autonomy is very important, and we're very pleased that the Commission has picked up on this. And if you read about this, the Commissioner did refer to this. We talk about comparable situations. Plant protection products is one of them. We can't have production moved outside of Europe and then have more expensive products imported. We need to ensure that within trade agreements we do have fairness, sustainability criteria. Trade agreements without criteria are not good for us. The world also needs food produced by Europe. We have already said this, seen this, for example, in Ukraine. All of a sudden, there were the blockades in the Black Sea, and trade flows were moved, and Europe had to pick up on these too.
The value chain aspects of income, we need to have create added value in the value chain and make sure that added value comes back to the farm. For that, you need to know what added value do you want and how do you opinionate that. Secondly, we need more crisis management in the EU, in the common agricultural policy, but also outside of it, to cover up all the disturbances we are seeing. And thirdly, we need a territorial approach for the regions in which agriculture may not be as economic viable, but we need farmers for the rural areas. The commissioner already said it at the border of Finland and the Baltics, but also in the more in the Alps, in the regions where with the disadvantaged regions, we need agriculture there as well. We need a strong second pillar for that. It's a discussion we're going to have in the next 2 months, quite harshly, I suspect, but this is also very important for the income of farmers.
Thank you. And then I'll come to you.
Finance can enter into the formation of price. No, it's also finance is very relevant. It's not only the access to finance which is relevant, but also the terms that you get. And in this sense, it's what as a European Investment Bank, what we do on top of providing finance is also blend our resources with public resources, European resources, national and regional resources, to decrease the cost of finance and to lengthening the period of the loan, which also is something relevant. So I think that our experience also in other sectors by working with the European Union budget is that through the guarantee we can take much more risk, we can provide finance at a lower cost. So in this sense, I think that the financial instruments, also financing mechanisms are relevant to keep competitive and to improve the competitiveness of the European farming sector.
Thank you. We began our panel with the voice of young farmers, and I would like to make sure the last person who speaks on our panel is a farmer. So, Erika.
Thank you. And if as a farmer, if I'm allowed to answer the question, do I want fair payment for the food I produce? Of course, the answer is yes. But I also want a fair payment for all the other services I provide to society, such as water, clean soil, biodiversity, and so on. And I'm convinced that if we can find a system that fully rewards farms who translate their farmers who translate their farms into more sustainable systems or organic farms and get paid for that, then we will see many more young farmers, because it's a way to find more money from the farm except the food we produce. So yes, yes indeed, we need a fair payment, otherwise we can't continue.
Excellent, thank you very much. That was a great message to end our panel on. And before we go to lunch, at the beginning of the day, I told you we've got a fantastically talented visual facilitator who's been capturing some of your ideas. And she's going to show us what she captured from the first plenary. She's still working on our section, but we're going to see the image that she developed from our first plenary. So could we see on screen what Julia prepared for our first panel? And there we can see she's developed something really wonderful, shaping the future. And as I said, this and all of the images that she prepares will be on the conference website for you to download, share, and use in the future. And in the afternoon, at the end of the day, when she shows us more images, she'll tell us a little bit more about them. But just a little highlight there to show some of our conversations earlier. We're going to go to lunch, but as we do so, we need to say goodbye to our online audiences, because after lunch we go straight into breakouts. So can I ask you all to wave goodbye to our online audiences. Bye. See you at 4 o'clock. For everyone who is here, we're going to invite you to go to lunch, which is just outside this room. But before you go, can you please look at your badge? Your badge has a colored dot. It's either red or yellow or blue. That represents the workshop you registered for. Please go to that one, because we've allocated the room according to the size. Please make sure you're there for 1:30 precisely. Thank you and bon appétit.